What's your name and where are you from?
My name is Annie McCaffrey and I'm from Springfield, Illinois.
And how long have you been traveling the world?
I've been traveling the world about 2 years, full time.
And that's a really long time, actually.
Yeah.
Do you have an actual house then, since you travel so much?
I do. I have one here, and my brother and his girlfriend and their baby live in it. So they've been trying to keep it up for me.
Got ya. So when you come back, you stay there with them?
No, I stay with my parents because there's not enough room in my house.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's cool. So, a couple questions in this question.
Okay.
When was the first time you went out of the country? Was it by yourself and were you scared?
I think the first time I went out of the country that I can remember, I was about 20. I was in college, and I went with a college group. It was cool. We went up to Toronto, Canada, and we went up to a center for refugees who had been tortured.
Wow.
So there were people from other countries, and they've been tortured, and we got to go see a couple different people. We saw somebody from Ethiopia, and then the one guy we saw was really amazing. He was from Libya, and Muammar Gaddafi had hunted down his whole family and killed them, and he had escaped just by the skin of his teeth. He was a reporter, and that really changed my whole life when I was 20. It really gave me like a worldview, because I came from the Midwest, and all we knew was, you know, white people, and just didn't know many people, so.
Wow, that is crazy. So that experience changed you a whole lot.
Absolutely.
How long were you there?
16 days, and I stayed with a Chinese family. They had 3 or 4 kids, but they could only pay for 2 kids to come over. And the first 8 years, they didn't get their kids at all. Their grandparents were taking care of the kids, and they had just enough money for them. And so when they could, they paid for their kids. And I never forget it, because we were told that you had to eat whatever was put in front of you. And for breakfast, they fed us Campbell's cheese soup with Chips Ahoy cookies. And we didn't know what to do with it, so we just watched to see what they were going to do. And they were so proud because they had bought us American food, because we were in Canada. And so I said, this looks delicious, you know, what do you do with it? And he was so happy, he was just smiling, and he just took the Chips Ahoy cookie and he like dumped it into the cheese soup and like just slurped it off. And I was like, whoo, okay. So that was my first experience. That was really awesome. It was really awesome.
What, did you eat it?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we were told you had to eat. And you have to understand, when I was a kid, I was such a picky eater. Like, everything had to be separate. The peas couldn't touch the gravy, couldn't touch the potatoes. Like, everything was separate. And once I started going out of the country, you can't do that anymore. You just have to eat what's put in front of you.
For sure. So you've traveled a lot in the last 2 years. Where are some places that you've been to?
In the last 2 years, I've been to Germany a couple times, England a couple times, Israel a couple of times, Turkey, I'm just trying to think, France, Belgium, and Switzerland. Yeah.
Brazil. You went with my husband.
Brazil, sorry. I went with my husband to Brazil. Actually, I went twice to Brazil, so yeah, that was awesome. I think that's it. I'm sorry, I can't, that's probably it.
Okay, so what in the world made you want to travel, like, so far? Because when you were, that first experience you had, you were pretty young and you just started doing this full time the last 2 years. So what made you want to travel full time? Well,
first of all, I am single. So, and I don't have a lot of commitments. I will tell you this time why I started traveling. And that's because about 4 or 5 years ago, my mom had really bad cancer. And she almost died about 5 times. And right after she got better, and she's cancer-free now, but right after she got better, they called me and they told me I had uterine cancer. And so it was scary, and they took everything out. And I just decided I wasn't going to wait for invitations. I wasn't going to wait for the money to come in. I just wasn't going to wait anymore, because life's just too darn short. And, you know, when I was young, I was probably 14 years old, I had a dream. It was so vivid. It was an incredibly vivid dream. And I walked into like a A-frame white room, and there were all these little white slat cribs in the room. And as I walked into the room, all of these babies with kind of coffee-colored, chocolate-colored skin started reaching through the slats of the cribs and started reaching up to me. And I would bend down and pick them up and hold them. And the dream was so real that I tried to join the Peace Corps at first. And then I went on a trip to an orphanage in Mexico. And when I did that on the tour, I was 20 years old, maybe 22. And when I did that, I literally walked straight in to my dream. I mean, it was exactly the way I dreamed it. The kids were in the white cribs. They were getting up from their nap. I had taken a little Spanish, and I literally just came back. I was doing cardiac research for a living out of Loyola. And I talked to everybody, and everybody said to me, they said, you know what? They said, when we were like 22, 25 years old, we had this opportunity to go do something just amazing, and we didn't take it. And they said, just go. And I said, well, what about my job? Because I was doing some pretty interesting stuff. And they're like, you know what? If it's here when you get back, that's fine. And if it's not, then you'll get something else. And so I just left it all, and I moved to the orphanage when I was 24 years old. And it was the best choice I ever made. And it got me on this thing of just realizing that it's totally worth it. It's totally worth it to just go for your dreams. It's totally worth it. Totally worth it.
So how long did you stay down there?
I stayed there a year and a half.
Okay, very cool. And that changed you a lot then, huh?
Yeah, and I got hepatitis. So, but it was totally worth it. So, it was totally worth it. It changed me a lot. You know, people live on nothing. And they have to bring in their own water every day. And sometimes their water turns on at 4 in the morning from the pump. And that's when they get up and they fill their little basin of water that day. And I worked with kids, and we would go out to the camps, and we would have to cross through the barbed wire to go call the kids to come to school. And, you know, one kid would have on a pair of pants, and the other kid would have on a shirt. And maybe the third kid would have a pair of sandals. And we would give out peanut butter and clothes and tarps. And yeah, that was, you know what, it was one of the best year and a half of my entire life.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So since you travel so much now, and you know, a lot of people are probably wondering, like, you must be rich or something. Like, what exactly is your occupation? Like, what do you do?
I'm not rich. I probably have a couple $100 right now because somebody gave me some money. But basically, I just go wherever God tells me to go. And what I said about the cancer is really true. I had always wanted to go out to see different nations and different cultures and do whatever. And I just decided to go. And when I decided to just go for it, then the money started coming in and the opportunities started coming in. And so I'll get someplace and someone will say to me, oh, you need to come to Belgium and, you know, come speak to the ladies about getting your heart healed. Or, you know, why don't you come to England? We've got some people who were really abused as children. And I end up just kind of teaching them how to get their heart free. And I just do whatever. You know, when I was in Brazil, I was just supposed to do whatever. And so, you know, I was on a radio program. And then I sang in front of like 8,000 people. And it's kind of whatever was needed, I do. So mostly I just try to go around encouraging people and seeing their hearts get set free. That's my big thing. That's my big thing.
That's really cool. So we, like you, travel by faith.
Yeah.
100%. And we, you know, a lot of people don't necessarily always believe us, but does God really always come through for you when you need it financially?
Yes.
Do you have any, like, stories to tell about, you know, God coming through for you about that?
Yeah. There's a bunch of them, but one of my favorites is, I think one of my favorites is I was going to Brazil about a year ago, and I didn't have the money for the plane ticket, and I didn't know where I was staying, who I was staying with, what I'd be doing, but God had told me, whatever happens, you say yes. And so I got the invite to come, and so I said yes, but I didn't have any money, and it just so happened that the pastors that I needed connected with, came up to Springfield, Illinois. And they were only coming for lunch. They weren't coming for any more time than that. And that day, my mom calls me and she says, you have to come to a meeting at our house because we have this new financial guy and you have to come. And I'm like, I can't. If I don't meet with these people, I don't know where I'm staying, and I don't even know who's picking me up from the airport. And she's like, no, you have to be at this meeting. We'll only take 1 hour. And so I came, and this guy said to me, her financial guy, said, you know, if you have time after this meeting, I know you just got back from Israel. I'd love to hear stories about Israel. And I said, you know, I'm so sorry. I don't have any time for you. I have to go meet with these people. And I'm not kidding, 5 times. 5 times he interrupted the meeting and said, if you just had like 15 minutes to talk to me about Israel, I would love to hear about it. And I really didn't have time. I kept looking at the clock until I knew that they weren't going to be there anymore. The lunch was over. And finally, on the 5th time that the guy asks me, I heard God say to me, talk to the man already. And so I just gave up and I looked at him and I said, okay, I have time for you. What would you like to know? And no kidding, at that moment, he pulls out his checkbook and he writes me a check for $1,000, which pays for my trip to Brazil. And what happened, because he told me later, he said, when you walked in the door, he's a really nice Catholic guy, and he said, when you walked in the door, I heard God say, write her a check. And every time you looked at the clock, God said, write her a check. And he said, the last time when you looked at the clock and I knew you were going to leave, God started yelling at me, write the check now! And he was so freaked out. He was only going to give me $100. But he was so freaked out, he wrote the check for $1,000. And we just sat there for maybe an hour and just talked about all the ways that God's just always provided for me. So that's how I got to go to Brazil.
That is very cool.
Yeah.
Do you always know where you're going in advance?
No.
Like how exactly, how do you figure out where you're going?
Well, sometimes people invite me. Okay, so I was in Israel and I met some really cool people that were Slovakian from Brussels. And they said, well, you must come to Brussels and you must stay in our house. And I'm like, okay. I mean, I just felt like that was an open door and that I should do that. And so I did that. And then somebody else came up to me and was like, no, you need to stay in my house. And then I want to take you to Slovakia. And I'm like, okay, so that's something that's still coming up. And there's just things like that. Things happen, especially like in Europe. When you're in Europe, you meet a lot of people from a lot of other places. And in general, Europeans are like, oh, come stay in my house, you know? And I don't know, I just get a really good sense about who they are. And I just feel like God's saying, I can go do this. And every time I've done it, it's been amazing. And even when it didn't work out, like one time I went into Switzerland and things really fell apart, who I was supposed to be staying with, like I ended up getting to stay like right on the border in the French Alps in somebody else's house. And her husband ended up paying for us to fly to Israel for 5 days for the lady's birthday. So like even when it didn't work out for the first thing, I didn't give up hope. I just kind of said, God, what are you doing? You know? And then this other stuff opened up. And so I've been doing this for 2 years now. And as soon as I leave here, in September, I'm going back to Brussels. And then I'm going back to Germany and back to England and back to Brussels. And I'm not sure where else. So the door right now is open for Brussels and Belgium. It's got a lot of refugees in it. Same with Germany. And it's just really cool stuff's happening, you guys. Really cool stuff happening. Really cool.
So, tell some, like a story or two about some stuff that you do overseas.
Okay. Can I talk about Syria?
You can talk about whatever you want.
Okay. So, there's just this little tiny church in the middle of Germany. What used to be East Germany when I was growing up. So communist Germany when I was growing up. And, you know, one guy helped one Afghani refugee, because Germany is actually helping the refugees. They're not just saying they're helping the refugees. And so this guy helps one Afghani refugee get his court papers together and helps him go to court. He brings in a couple Iranians. They bring in some more Afghanis and some more Syrian young men. And so I go meet these guys in November and this kid greets us, and it was just amazing. I mean, I just said, "Oh, are you one of the Iranians?" And he goes, "No." He goes, "I'm Syrian," and he named what city he was from, which at that time was being bombed by both the president and ISIS. And then we're just sitting talking, and he said, ISIS shot my mom 4 times in the head and killed her. And he started crying, and he said, I'm the only son, and I don't know where she's buried, and it's a big shame for my family. But if I go back, they'll kill me. And, I mean, he's got his master's degree in English. I mean, he's a teacher. I mean, very educated kid. And he just started crying. And everything in me was like, oh my God. Everything in me was like that mama thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But culturally, I know culture, and I knew that I probably couldn't hug him. And we just met, and I wasn't family, and I didn't know exactly what his background was. And, I mean, he told me he was like an atheist, okay? So I knew that probably culture-wise I probably could approach him a little bit. And so, so the second time that he mentioned about his mom dying, everything in me was just burning. And I just stood up and I go, "Can I give you a hug?" And before he said yes, I just grabbed him and I just hugged him. And when I went back to Germany a couple months later, I did kind of like a boot camp on how to forgive people. And he was in my class, and he actually forgave ISIS.
Wow.
It was powerful. Powerful. And he changed his name and he changed his name to this little kid that had died, and it was his nephew, but it was like his son. And the kid had actually died the week before this meeting, and he had been barrel bombed by President Assad. You know, where they take barrels of shrapnel and they fill it with explosive materials, and then they just drop them out of helicopters and they catch people on fire and explode. And so, this wasn't an easy thing when I was talking about forgiveness. And he forgave. I mean, it was powerful, powerful. And so I went to go see him in February, and he was just starting to get his life together. He was in school. He was starting to process all of his emotions and everything he'd seen when he was in Syria. He remembers ISIS stopping him with machine guns in the middle of the road. They were in a car, and he wasn't driving. He was in the passenger seat, and they flew open the doors, and they threw all the body parts on top of them, and they said, "Get these to the hospital right now." And they just threatened to kill him if he didn't drive away. And, he just was covered in blood and body parts. And, he was starting to feel safe enough in Germany that he was starting to process all of his emotions. And so that was February, and I just got to see him just like about a month ago. And he came to me and he said, "Do you remember when we first met?" Which of course is only like 6 months ago. And I said, "Absolutely." And he said, "Do you remember when you offered to give me a hug?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You were my first hug." And I said, "Oh, do you mean in Europe?" And he said, No. He said, "My mom always told me that she loved me, but she never hugged me." He's like, "You were my first hug ever." And I could tell you about lots of wild things that are happening in Germany and Europe. There's lots of cool things. But, just one hug. Just one hug. Change somebody's life forever. Change my life forever. So that's kind of the stuff I do.
That is really awesome. I can't even imagine stuff like that, especially since I live here in America, and stuff like that is not happening here, but we hear about it. Do you feel like here in America that we're just pretty desensitized to stuff that we hear on the news? And, we don't have too much emotion. I mean, we may hear about it and feel bad, but it's not in our face, so...
It's not in our face. I don't know if it's desensitizing or if it's just... We just haven't had experience with it. I know when my mom went through cancer, it ripped me apart. And all of a sudden, I realized, like, all the people I knew whose mothers had died of cancer, even when I was in high school. And I was just struck with how insensitive I was. I felt really bad. And then it just really struck me that, I just didn't know. And it wasn't real enough to me. And in Europe, there's so many refugees that it's absolutely as real can be. And, if anything ever happens here, and that happens, it'll become real. It'll become real. And then, each person will have the challenge of, do you step up to that challenge or do you run away? So.
Is this something that you think you want to do for the rest of your life?
Yeah, in some form or another. Absolutely. I mean, I don't know how long I'll keep going at what I'm doing. I hope it's at least 5 or 6 or 10 more years. And the stuff I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, people I'm meeting, it's just pretty outrageous. It's pretty outrageous. And you know what? At the end of the day, I'm still Annie McCaffrey from Springfield, Illinois. Like, that doesn't change. And I'm just me. But I get to see what God's really doing all over the world. And I get to see hearts healed. And for me, that's super important. I think it's one of the biggest gifts. I think anytime anybody wants to share their biggest hurts with you and let you in, it's quite a privilege.
I totally agree. Where are you off to next? Do you have plans next? Because coincidentally, we both travel, but we ended up in Springfield at the same time.
Yeah.
But where are you off to next?
I am off to California first, because I used to live out there, and I have friends and family out there. And then I'm heading back to Belgium. Again, just because doors opened up to do a women's conference with a bunch of Africans. In other words, Rwandans and Cameroon, people from Cameroon. It's just crazy. Nigerians, people from the Congo. And so I'm going to go do a women's conference there. And then I'm going to do a Healing the Heart conference in England. And then I go to Germany. So I'll be in the north of Germany. And we'll just see. I don't know. I'm really open. I just want to be in the center of whatever God's doing.
So one last question, because I'm sure people are curious after hearing all this. I mean, do you speak fluently in all these languages, or like what happens when you go there?
God, no. No. Can I tell one story?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So this is from Brazil. Remember how I said, I don't think you know this story yet. This is when I went down, not with Derek. Okay.
Oh, okay.
And remember, I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what I was going to be doing. And God said, whatever happens, you just say yes. And so one day, my friend says to me, she gets me up early, and she says, come, we go to the radio station. I'm going to go speak in front of 60,000 people. You just sit there. And I'm like, okay. Now, I know Spanish. I do know Spanish. And I know a little bit of Portuguese. But I probably only know 25, 35 words in Portuguese. Okay? And I'm pretty tired. And so we go to the radio station, and I've never been on the inside. It was pretty cool. And we're sitting inside so she can be recorded, and she's got the earphones on, she's in the microphone, the manager's there, and she starts talking, and I'm pretty tired, it's early in the morning, and so I put my head back and I close my eyes, and I can hear her talking, but I'm not processing anything at all. And all of a sudden, it goes dead silent. So I open my eyes and I look at her, and she is staring me down, and she's going like this, she's pointing at me, and she's pointing in the microphone, and she's going like, you, in the microphone. And I'm like, I didn't hear what she said. And so I'm like, what do you want me to do? And she says, you pray in the microphone. And I'm like, I know like 10 prayer words all together. That's it. In Portuguese. That's it. Okay, I know like God, and I know like a couple other things, and that's it. And so I say to her, English? And she goes, Portuguese. And I'm like, and God said to me, whatever happens, you gotta say yes. And so I go and I put the earphones on, and I scoot up to the microphone, and I scoot up there, and I just take a big deep breath, and I try to remember all 10 words that I know. And this was my prayer. This was my prayer in Portuguese. I'm gonna translate it for you so that you know it, okay? This is literally how it went. I took a breath and I went, God, because I know that word. You big, you big God. And then I had to think of some more words I knew. And I was like, city, yours, and angels. Lots and lots and lots of angels, amen. And that was my whole prayer. God, it was ridiculous, okay? And the manager guy starts laughing his butt off, and he's like, well, that was interesting, wasn't it, folks, okay? And they just went on, okay? And that's fine. I mean, it's pretty ridiculous. And so the whole next week, my friend, every time that I'm going to go speak someplace, she grabs me around the waist and she starts telling all the women, did you hear Annie on the radio? Did you hear her? Wasn't she great? She was like, God, you big God, city yours. And she just teased me nonstop. At every meeting I was at, she teased me. So for a week, she did that to me. And the last day before I left her city, she did that in front of somebody. And the person said, no. I was listening to the radio that day. That's not Annie's prayer. Annie's prayer, I remember it. And I know it was her speaking. And her prayer was like, oh God, you are so magnificent and powerful and mighty. How great is your name? And I'm like picking out the words that I spoke, but I didn't speak any of the other words in between. And I just kept thinking, that's not what I said, right? And this lady's like, and she ended it with like, you release your angels, lots and lots of angels, amen. And I'm like, okay, so part of that's what I said. And so I was like, God, that's not what I said. And God said to me, I got your back. He's like, I can make people hear whatever they want. You just have to say yes. And
That
that's
is
my story.
awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah.
I thank you so much for this interview and this time, because we were both extremely busy while we're here and home. So I thank you so much for your time,
Well,
Annie.
let me say this too. I want to say I've been watching you guys. I've been keeping up with y'all, and I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
You really are stepping out and just trying things and watching things happen. And God's really providing for you guys. I think it's awesome. So I hope you all enjoy this, and I hope it encourages you.
For sure. Thank you, Annie.